This is certainly not the first financial crisis that Turkey survives. There were a few other ones in past 20 years, and for those who face this kind of financial crisis for the first time, I can tell you from my experience, it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right, not very soon, but I think within a year things will start improving. For now, things are really tough. Stuff on business, stuff on people. There are certainly some people who enjoy life, as in any financial crisis. For most people, it's really bad, but for a few people, it's pretty good. It's not very easy for some expats, particularly for those who work in Turkey and for those who have fixed income. People who work in Turkey, for them, it's real tough. What we see right now, that factories are closing, the businesses are closing, and the bankruptcies are rising. Remember to subscribe, leave some comments, particularly if you have something to say about your personal situation. I really appreciate everyone who leaves the comments. They give me some really good ideas. They inform not only me, but those people who also watch the video. They go to comments, they read about people living in other places, and they're interested in Turkey. So thank you so much. Put some thumbs up, that helps the video, share it with somebody. What we see right now is different from previous crises in one way. What we have is very much overvalued lira, and we have still pretty high inflation. Inflation is coming down, but lira is staying stable. Some of my subscribers pointed out that lira is devaluing. Honestly saying, I really don't see it devaluing. If you look at lira, it pretty much stays right around 34. It goes up a little bit, down a little bit. It's all noise. So lira, by historic term, is way overvalued. And that manifests itself in several different places, particularly in exporting. What we see right now and what exporters report, that cost of manufacturing in Turkey, the garment manufacturing in particular, is 40% higher than in the Far East, Vietnam, Bangladesh, etc. And Turkey is a major supplier to European brands. Unfortunately, with this kind of manufacturing costs, proximity doesn't really give any advantage. Even though Turkey is close to Europe, even though it has some attractive customs treaties, still the costs are high. And what we see is that bankruptcies are rising. 15,000 businesses were closed in the first 7 months of this year in Turkey, and many suppliers are going down. They're going to be really, really hurt. In Turkey in particular, it's practiced everywhere in the world, but in Turkey often people delay payments. It's the whole supply chain functions on trust. I give you my threads, which I manufacture, you make canvas, you make fabric, and then another person will sew it into finished product, etc., etc. So when the finished product manufacturer goes down, then it goes down the chain, and people get fired. They actually lose employment. That is big. If we're talking about just garment manufacturing, it employs formally and informally over 2 million people in Turkey. That number is huge, and there are quite a few businesses which laid off up to 40%, and sometimes they entirely closed operation. They cease to exist. They may still have a property, but it doesn't function. That is the problem. On a personal level, I was talking to some friends who have children in Antalya and whose children go to private school. Here is some spread for you guys to kind of comprehend. The private school in Turkey will cost you roughly 600,000 lira for 2 children. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, but that will include school, that will include food, and that will include books. The books are very expensive. One of my friends said that they spent over $1,000 in dollar term for books for each child. They have 2 of them. And of course, if you have more than 2, that becomes really tough. I know that some of you, if you look at that number in dollar term and you live in a Western country, you will say that it's not that expensive. But for Turkey, where you have minimum wage going up to 17,000 lira in near future, that number is huge. It's gonna really hit the wallet. It's gonna hurt the budget. And for those people whose children already went to school, they're a little bit more in advantageous position because you are locked in a certain level, and the increase which school can apply to your tuition is not as high. People who actually been to school for several years, and one of my friends has situation like that, they pay about $2,500 per child. Again, I'm just passing to you what was passed to me. I don't have children going to school, and if they tell me in dollar, I tell you in dollar. If they tell me in lira, I tell you in lira. That's just how it is. But the books is outrageously expensive. Everyone I talk to, they complain about the books because there is really nothing special about them. They're just way too expensive. It's not something that you can justify, but they still have to pay it because there is no way around. You cannot use used books because school really makes money on that, let's face it. And that's how it's going right now. I know in the Western world, particularly in the United States, it's been like this for ages. They don't want to accept the previous year edition. They want only this year edition, etc. And you cannot resell your books anymore because nobody wants them. They just basically want to consume, consume, and consume. So 2 of my friends said this is the last year they're going to the private school, and next year they're going to regular school because this kind of money, you can hire really good tutors and you can actually have private schooling in some fashion and public school in some fashion, and that should give you pretty decent result. Of course, if you want to follow foreign school program, you don't really have this kind of a luxury. You probably will have to do homeschooling, or you will have to move out of the country. A little bit further on a personal level, speaking of cost of meat, ground beef will cost you roughly 540, 560 lira per kilo. You can convert to dollar and figure out how much would it be. And if you want to have nice cut steak, it may go as high as 900, 950. And sometimes if you want to have a premium meat, it will be more. As far as lamb will cost you roughly about 700, 750 lira per kilo, which is pretty expensive. Milk cost is about 40, 45 lira per liter. And if you're talking about eggs, 30 pieces will cost you 125 lira at the store. There will be some noise if you go to different places. There will be a little bit less, a little bit more, but this is the general ballpark if you want to know just basic food prices. The reason that many businesses are closing, in addition to what I already told you, is that utilities are quite a bit expensive in Turkey now. And gas was increased 7-fold, and electricity was increased, I believe, 3-fold. And everything is becoming more expensive. That is tough. But Turkey did go through previous crises too. And if you guys, some of you maybe, heard of high inflation in United States in 1980s, you may know that they actually tackled it. And the interest rates at that time in the United States went as high as, I believe, 18 and sometimes 20%. To tackle it down, they hired the guy, I believe his name was Paul Walker, and he actually worked on that. It was not a very popular measure, but it had to be done. What's happening in Turkey, I think, is very similar. And I don't have any inside information. It is purely deductive method of Sherlock Holmes. The lira is way overvalued. Why it is overvalued? One thing is you really tighten up the money supply. The way money supply increases when people borrow money, every loan they borrow, that is the supply of money which increases in the economy. With 50% interest rate, it's really tough, and sometimes it's more than 50%. It's really tough, and if it's going anywhere further up, it's going to be unreachable. And people who have money, they put them in the bank because they can get it. With lira staying stable in exchange rate, it is overvalued. The measures which taken in Turkey now, definitely not popular. People are very, very disgruntled. Most likely, people who are involved in implementing these policies of really tight economic situation, they probably will resign. But before they resign, they are called to do their job. Like in the United States, people who are involved in this unpopular measure, eventually they became university professors, and they sort of like moved away from politics, and nobody wants to tell people that life will be tough. And Turkey right now, in terms of cost of living, income, is quite comparable with Spain. Unfortunately, if you go to the restaurant or coffee shop, it's not going to be like that. And recently, Turkey had proposed a new law that will be to limit use of cash. How it will be implemented, I don't know. But the proposal is to disallow paying more than 7,000 lira in cash in businesses during transactions. And they propose some penalties for those people who actually do. Those kind of measures are actually put in many countries. In some countries, such as the United States, it's $10,000. In countries like Spain, it's $1,000, and Italy, it's $2,000. Those measures are really not applied to foreigners, at least in Europe. When tourists come, and particularly when they come from Russia, and Russia is under sanction, and there are very few people who have credit cards which will work in a foreign country, they bring cash and they will spend cash. This kind of limit on cash is going to hurt local economy because tourists want to spend money. Otherwise, they will never go outside of their all-inclusive area because they will not have money to spend, and they will have no desire to spend. That will hurt the economy even further. If you want to know more what's going on in Turkey right now, there are going to be 2 videos here which you can check and see if there is something else you can learn.